I'm Bob Garfield, co-host of On the Media on public radio. It turns out that the previous 36 or 37 speakers as a group have eroded the time allotted for the morning session, so I'll just say thanks for your attention. Bye-bye. Okay, thank you, Devlin. I come to you this morning with some statistics about the American public. The cohort of Americans who own guns is 36%. The portion that eats at McDonald's at least once a week is 44%. Who believe that dreams can foretell the future, 53%. The percentage of Americans with herpes, somewhere between 50 and 80%. And the percentage who insist on democracy as our form of government, 1 in 4. That's from the latest World Values Survey, which is a super fun read, like the latest UN climate report or Dante's Inferno. As we've heard throughout the morning, this is a vivid reflection of the plummeting trust in the institutions of government and society, from the intelligence services to the Justice Department to civil society, and most especially the press, which faces baseless partisan accusations of fake news and is constantly vilified by the President of the United States as an enemy of the people, which is obviously preposterous. Here are some enemies of the people. And of course, that vulgar, authoritarian chief executive spewer of hateful language who simply exudes narcissism and haunts our TV screens. I've been told not to get political, so I thought the pizza delivery category was wide open. Anyway, the status quo is beyond heartbreaking because the damage is all too real. Demonizing rhetoric and metastasizing distrust, along with genuine shortcomings, obviously makes it more difficult for the press to uphold our First Amendment responsibility to watchdog government and other institutions of society. As such, I regard that ongoing campaign to delegitimize the media as nothing less than an existential threat. Unfortunately, of the threats facing the free press, demagoguery is a distant number 2. Number 1 is this. In the past 15 years, the digital revolution, like so many revolutions before it, has left blood flowing in the gutters. The global advertising spend, once divvied up among a few thousand media outlets worldwide, is now shared by an almost infinite number of publishers. And a huge chunk of it, including 100% of every new ad dollar spent in mobile, is swallowed by Facebook and Google, which are algorithmically constructed not to serve news curated for a broad view of events, but rather to feed the demonstrated tastes of the user, which is the prescription for the filter bubble. Or more to the point, the filter bubble archipelago, a vast, disconnected agglomeration of ideological islands where individuals immerse themselves in comfortable content that validates, not challenges or enlarges, their worldviews. And why do we, as news consumers, indulge in such self-gratification? Because we can. And we do. And every second we self-gratify, we're sapping revenue from the news media, resulting in the slow strangulation of viable, rigorous journalism. Media profitability, which in the good old days of mass advertising and ominous media concentration, has gone from 30 and 40% to 0% or worse. Not just among legacy journalistic brands, but also countless digital natives, whether Vox or BuzzFeed or Patch or Huffington Post. It's said to be the golden age of content. I would say this is the very tail end of the golden age of VCs underwriting publishers with no coherent business model. Newspapers in particular are being kept alive by draconian retrenchment, by extremely dubious so-called native advertising, foolish investors, a little bit of noblesse oblige, and a handful of extremely patient billionaires. The consequence? An ever-expanding news desert, including courthouses, city halls, state houses, school board rooms, and other halls of governance populated with zero reporters. A study released yesterday by the University of North Carolina School of Media and Journalism reveals that since 2004, 20% of the country's metro and community papers have gone out of business. 1,300 communities have lost all news coverage. All. How is a citizen to engage in the democratic process if the process has been rendered invisible? As the founder of something called the Media Future Summit, which is an initiative in its 4th year at the University of Pennsylvania to seek ethical, sustainable revenue sources and business models to keep the journalistic lights on, I regret to inform you that the prospects are bleak. Yes, there's a proliferation of nonprofits mimicking public broadcasting's business model. There are a host of hyperlocals struggling against the forces of supply and demand to be the eyes and ears of their communities. And there are those billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Patrick Soong-Seong and Sheldon Adelson who buy papers with no reasonable expectation of profit, which is a blessing, except when it isn't, because history tells us that publishers publishing cartoons sometimes have ulterior motives that aren't necessarily beneficial to their audiences. In any event, there is no white knight, there is no silver bullet, there is no pouch of magic beans over the horizon to rescue the media sector from economic oblivion. But maybe a glimmer of hope. My brief here this morning is outlook. It happens that I'm working on a book that offers just that. After laying out the ruinous combination of fragmented politics and fragmented media that have landed democracy in such a precarious place, this will imagine a near future in which Mr. Dumpty could find himself at least on the mend. Immutable ledger technology has many applications. The most well-known is cryptocurrency, which can enable frictionless micropayments now impossible under expensive, cumbersome payment systems. Users could, with a click, pay tiny sums for an individual piece of content, permitting a la carte consumption of content free of advertising, or voluntary tips over and above the existing advertising or subscription models. It might also commodify actual audience attention, converting it into credits in the form of crypto tokens, guaranteeing that that attention has been earned. And that versus the extraordinarily inefficient status quo, in which advertisers pay for impressions, but through an estimated 50% of those supposed impressions, due to bot fraud and unviewable pages, go unseen by human eyes. The blockchain could clear that out of the system. Facebook in particular has been the conduit of hate speech and lies, big and small. It has been the stifler of exchange in the marketplace of ideas. It has sucked more than half of the revenue out of the overall advertising economy. It has allowed mercenary and prying hands to invade our privacy. It profits off the flood of phony, dishonest, demagogic speech that drowns out reasoned debate, and it is the location of the filter bubble archipelago. And as such, whether by legislation, regulation, litigation, or preemptive action by the company itself, I expect it to be broken up. In 1964, Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside of her Queens apartment. And as the story went, not a single neighbor hearing her scream so much as lifted the telephone to call the police. as the situation we're in now was a kind of come-to-Jesus moment for the society? Had we become so complacent, so insular, so frightened that we couldn't fulfill the basic human duty of coming to a neighbor in extremis? Well, that was precisely the question addressed by one of the major networks in a sort of national citizenship test, a 2-hour primetime special that plumbed viewers' consciences. It was, in effect, a national encounter session, made possible because 1964, there were 3 major networks, there were 2 news magazines, and a couple of thousand local newspapers. But, of course, now, this is 2018, nearly infinite media channels. How, in so fragmented a media world, could we trigger such a national conversation? Virtual 1964. I foresee a campaign of collaboration across TV, radio, the internet, podcasts, the town halls, country music, hip-hop, video games, you name it, plus school grades 3 through 12, to acquaint and reacquaint Americans about democracy's core values and its functions, to dramatize the stakes with real-life stories, contemporaneous and historical, to entertain, to engage, to explain, to educate, and to inspire audiences about democracy's virtues, not the least of which being the free press. And I foresee this not because it was in my dreams, but because I'm kind of in the middle of it. In conjunction with colleagues at Wharton and Brookings, and now in association with dozens on the way to hundreds of venerable institutions representing the breadth of the political spectrum in American society. In November 2019, the Purple Project aims, with dozens of content partners, maybe scores, to engineer media and educational ubiquity, utterly nonpartisan, utterly decentralized, utterly urgent, to rekindle not just trust in, but enthusiasm for the freaking American way. Now, I can't exactly pitch Purple to you because we're actually still in stealth and you're not here to be pitched, but it is happening. It is happening, and you should take heart. Take heart that the media themselves, however under threat, are summoning the resolve to resuscitate the 75% weakened but still beating heart of democracy. And I hope you can be there with us. Thank you very much.